Yeah, so Hebrews, that was Hebrews 10. And we're going to be talking about the last half or so of that chapter today. 4 weeks ago now, I think it was, where we did the first half. We had some other things in between. So just in case, you're dusting away the cobwebs there, hopefully this helped. But remember that in the book of Hebrews, in the middle of the book, there's this long kind of section from end of chapter 4 to middle of chapter 10, where he's talking about Jesus, both kind of two things. First, his role as a high priest and how he's a better high priest than the Levites. And then secondly, his sacrifice and how the sacrifice that he offers is far better and superior to the sacrifice of the blood and goats under the old covenant. And then he kind of ends, 4 weeks ago we ended that part with his kind of big crescendo. And so just to kind of, even though we listened to all of Hebrews 10, I want to just read that part again so that we can kind of get into the mindset. It's good if you're picking up the Bible to just read something. It's good to maybe go a few verses before that just to kind of understand or remind yourself, what the context was. Like, where were we again? That kind of thing. So here we go. Oh, better turn this on. All right. So this is the last part of what we covered 4 weeks ago. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence for the entrance into the sanctuary by the blood of Jesus, by the new and living way which he inaugurated for us through the curtain, that is, his flesh. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us approach with a true heart in full assurance of faith, our hearts sprinkled clean from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for the one who promised is faithful. And let us think about how to stir one another up to love and good works, not abandoning our meeting together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging each other, and by so much more as you see the day draw near. Does that make you feel good? It's pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Let's keep reading. Oh, here we go. All right. For if we keep on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that is about to consume the adversaries. Anyone who rejected the law of Moses dies without mercy on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse punishment do you think a person will be considered worthy of who treats with disdain the Son of God and who considers ordinary the blood of the covenant by which he was made holy, and who insults the Spirit of grace? For we know the one who said, "Vengeance is mine, I will repay." And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a terrifying thing to fall into the hands of the living God. How does that one make you feel? It's a little different tone, a little bit. Just a tad. Just a tad. Yep. He as we'll see in this section, he starts bringing out multiple ways, as he did before in chapter 6, multiple ways of trying to motivate and encourage his listeners. And first he was talking at the end of what we covered 4 weeks ago. It's a big crescendo of yeah, come on, let's do it. And now here comes the stark warning. You might say first was the carrot, now is the stick. And he gives them a really, some of the strongest language as there is anywhere, as far as warnings, as there is anywhere in the book. So let's parse out a few things. Okay, so first of all, verse 26. Keep on sinning deliberately. After receiving knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains. So this is, I don't know if he knew how many volumes would be written about that phrase in that verse when he was writing it, the author of Hebrews. It's something you gotta, it really does like poke and prod you, doesn't it? And now remember, I'll remind you of something that the guys from Bible Project did in their overview video, which is they said, the point of these stern warning passages is to kind of startle you and like, oh, make you really uncomfortable, but not afraid. Okay? So, having said that, yeah, he's definitely talking about, one is keep on sinning, right? So something that is happening over and over again, the same thing, or maybe a similar thing. Right? That's the first thing. And then to do that deliberately. So the rub is, of course, that many Christians, probably maybe all Christians, we've experienced phases in our life and where, or maybe, we're still in one where there's something that we're trying to overcome and it's been really tough. And you know it's wrong, and you're trying not to, and sometimes you succeed, and sometimes you fail, and it's a battle for months, years, right? Anger issues, pornography addiction, other kinds of addiction. I mean, there's several things in that kind of category of habitual sin that we can all go, yeah, either I've struggled with that, or I know someone who did, or does, or whatever, right? And so what is this verse saying about that? That's the gray area. It's easier to talk about the white side and the black side of, okay, well, you're definitely okay if you're doing this, and you're definitely not okay if you're doing that. If you're just deliberately like ignoring, and I mean like just constantly like, I know it's good, and I know it's bad, and I could stop myself, but I'm just not going to, right? That's like the way bad side, and then there's the way good side, and the rub is in the middle, the gray, and that's where it's hard to see someone else's heart. That's where sometimes the enemy wants to make that a playground in your mind and kind of bring in guilt and shame and these things. I'll say that Jesus, when he, was on this earth, he was liberal with forgiveness. He's pretty radical about that. And that he knows our condition. He knows what it is to struggle with something. Not that he struggled with sin, but I mean that he knows what it is to be tempted. He was just the only one who could say no to all that 100%. Batting average. So yeah, there's nothing for it but to kind of let the Spirit search our hearts. If you think, is that me, right? I'll say that the most common thing is, these sometimes there's breakthroughs, but other times it's just a slow progression of a little bit incremental, inch by inch taking back ground. And other times you'll have like a big breakthrough or maybe 100% breakthrough in these issues. But then other than that, it's just, yep, I yelled at somebody one time fewer today. Or I still yelled at him the same amount, but I returned, I realized what I was doing wrong quicker. And I got myself back to and I asked for the Lord's forgiveness quicker. To me, those are all signs of somebody who's not intentionally, deliberately keeping on sinning. They are still sinning, but it's not deliberate, right? Anyway, it's not something that somebody from the outside can judge accurately. God can. But I'll also say this, that one, if you think you're in that situation, then get out. And if you can't or you don't know how, come talk to me, come talk to Tony, talk to Scott once he's back. Not right now, he has his hands full. And we'll help you however we can get that sorted, whether you are doing something or whether it's just the enemy trying to play tricks on your mind. Like, doesn't matter which one it is, but getting that sorted and getting out of that position should be a top priority. Secondly is, if you are concerned about someone that you know and love, that they're in that position, like, have a conversation with them. If you're in a position to have a conversation, I know these can be sensitive topics and all that, but if you're like, man, I'm just concerned, and it has to come from a heart of I want to see you restored, right? Not judgment, not you're doing wrong, you need to wake up, but it needs to come from a point of, like, I want to see you restored, and maybe you're blind to the fact that something's going on here. Or maybe you've just given up. Maybe you just need some encouragement to keep fighting it. Maybe you just, like, all those things, right? All those things. But as the author of Hebrews said, at the end of what we read last or 4 weeks ago, spurring on one another to love and good deeds is part of what this is about, and walking with somebody else. And so that's what this is for. So he says, if however somebody is just basically just flagrantly in this position of they're not heeding the Lord, they heard the truth, they know the truth, they just decided, no, I'm going to not do this, even though I know that this is what could happen. And he says there remains no sacrifice for them, because if they've turned their back on Jesus' sacrifice, then what other sacrifice is there going to be that could help them or save them, right? And so that's what he says. After receiving this knowledge, and if they just keep on deliberately, flagrantly sinning, then there's no sacrifice that remains. And he's warning his listeners to not go there. And he uses this argument. We talked about it a long time ago, but he's used it a few times. There's a rabbinic technique called an argument from lesser to greater, and they talk about something less and talk about something that's greater, and they say whatever is true about the lesser thing is even more true about the greater thing. And that's what he does in verse 28 and 29. He says, if it's true that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, if you committed one of the capital punishment offenses in the Old Testament law and the Mosaic law, if it's true that on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses you're executed, then it's even more true for someone that he just described, who is just deliberately turning their back on Jesus. And he goes into this list here, right, of considering, treating with disdain. The phrase is kind of a metaphor for it. You'll see in some translations is trampling on it, right? That's how low you consider it, that you're just walking all over it. Considering with disdain the Son of God, considering ordinary the blood of the covenant. Ordinary there is the opposite of holy, right? Common, some translations say. That's something that's ordinary or common is not fit for the sacrificial system, right? In your Old Testament Leviticus context. Something that's ordinary or common is not fit for offering a sacrifice of atonement or for presenting to God. And so if a person is treating the blood of Jesus that way, that's a big problem, right? That's a big problem. And he mentions also insulting the Spirit of grace. And then he quotes a couple pieces of lines from Deuteronomy 32. It's interesting that he says, "For we know the one who said," we've talked a lot about in this book about how the author of Hebrews is writing to people who are very familiar with the Old Testament. As it happens, this Deuteronomy 32 is actually a song that Moses wrote, that God in chapter 31, God tells Moses, write a song, and this song is going to live on throughout the decades and centuries in the memory of the Israelite people, and it'll stand as a witness against them when they break the covenant. He said, write a song, and God says, I promise you, it's going to live on. They may forget a lot of other things, but this they're going to remember, and it's going to be, it's going to be carried on and passed down through the centuries. And so yeah, they know the one who said. They know this song. They know their Old Testament, their Bible, but they know this song as a people. And yeah, he's just pointing out that, there's a couple places in this song, in particular, where, yeah, God judges the wicked, right? Like, and that's a thing that's going on. And he says he's just using that as a reminder. And he ends with this phrase or sentence: "It is a terrifying thing, a fearful thing, to fall into the hands of the living God." In the wrong way, right? That's the context. To fall in his hands, having done, having spurned him, having rejected him, and then to, there's no escape at that point. If this seems kind of harsh, yeah, I mean, it's like strong words. He's not the only one in the New Testament who says this sort of thing. Yeah. Paul said in 2 Corinthians that knowing the fear of the Lord is what motivated him to preach the gospel. Like knowing there's people out there that are in this position. If I don't tell them, if they don't accept Jesus, then they're in this position of falling into God's hands in judgment. And that motivated him. And then Jesus himself said, right, when he's sending his disciples out and he's telling them, look, you may encounter some opposition, but all they can do is kill you. Don't fear the ones who all they can do is kill your body, but rather fear the one who can destroy both body and soul in Gehenna, in hell. So he switches back to nice Jesus, but if you read that whole section. But right there, he kind of says it pretty clearly, like there's somebody that you should be, more concerned about, and somebody you have to give an account to, and it's Yahweh. It's not the people around you. So he gives them this strong warning, and you read your Old Testament. And you see that God had some strong consequences for the people of Israel for disobeying the covenant. And he warned them all about it. And man, speaking of Deuteronomy, read chapter 27, 28, somewhere in there. It has an awesome section of all the blessings that'll come. And then it has a section that's like twice as long of all the curses that'll come if they don't obey. Why is it? Why is it that this is so strong? He's given them a lot more. It's kind of like akin to the Spider-Man phrase: "With great power comes great responsibility." Only this is, if you know the will of God more, then you have a higher responsibility to obey it. And he has. The people of Israel are supposed to be his representatives to the nations. So he judges them more harshly when they fail at that. Jesus had the same thing to say about the leaders of the nation in his day. The strongest words were reserved for them. He said, you guys know better. You should know better. These people are just, they're illiterate. They can't read. They're just trying to follow the law that you tell them is the law to follow. But you're the ones that know, and you're leading them astray. And so representing God, knowing more about his will, brings with it a higher responsibility to adhere to that. And if that was true of the Israelites, how much more is that true of us? How much more is that true of us? Now, I'll end this bit by saying that fear of punishment is not the best way to introduce people to the gospel. It's a very poor way, actually. It's been practiced a lot. He is not saying, oh yeah, here's some stuff that you can trot out when you want to talk to your unbelieving friends, and you can just tell them, or when you're trying to convince somebody that's maybe they're on the edge of accepting Jesus or not, and you say, hey, you say to yourself, I bet if I tell them that if they don't accept him, they're going to hell, that might motivate them. He's not trying to motivate unbelievers. He's trying to just warn believers of if it gets this bad, you're in big trouble. Don't let it get that bad. So it's one thing to try to if you know somebody, this is a last-ditch effort. You know somebody who's a believer who is about to reject Christ or is on a path where that's absolutely going to lead there. Then, yeah, don't be shy about warning them, because they know, and then maybe they need to be reminded. Don't do it with other people. Don't do it with somebody who's having a bad day, struggling with sin. Don't do it with unbelievers. Let's remember that Jesus said that it was kindness that led to repentance, not a whole bunch of fire and brimstone preaching. All right, how you guys doing? It gets a little better, and then later it gets a lot better. The author of Hebrews doesn't stay here forever. He goes on to talk about their past, and he says, look, instead of this getting in danger of rejecting God and ending up being judged by him, like, here's what you need to do instead. You need to remember where you've been in God. And he says this: remember the former days in which, after you were enlightened, he's talking about receiving the gospel, you endured a great struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed both to insults and to afflictions, and sometimes becoming sharers with those who were treated this way. For you both sympathized with the prisoners and put up with the seizure of your belongings with joy, because you knew that you yourselves had a better and permanent possession. So here he just wants to remind them, like, don't forget of the things that you've done for God. Don't forget how when you first accepted him, you were being persecuted. But you took joy in knowing that you were suffering for something that was worthy to suffer for. Like Rod reminded us last week out of 1 Peter, if you suffer for doing good, that's if you want to suffer for doing good, not for doing bad. Suffer for doing good is okay. Not that it's fun, but it's okay to suffer for doing good. Suffering for doing bad, not okay. But he the author of Hebrews says, look, I know about your situation. I know where you came from. I know how it was like when you first believed and the opposition that you met, and how you guys stood together as a group of believers, and how you stood with each other. Like when it was coming at you, you accepted it and just endured. And when it was coming at your friend, you stuck with them. You visited them in prison too. And instead of just saying, if I go to prison to visit them, they're going to realize that I'm one of that gang and they might throw me in prison. No, you sympathize. You went with, and he's trying to say, remember that. Remember that you were able to to resist the temptation to fall away during persecution, that you were able to endure, and that now, when you're also in a new trial, just remember that you did it before, you can do it again. God helped you through it before, he can help you through it again. He's seeing that some people are wavering a little bit, right? That's the context that we can kind of discern from this book as a whole, that they're undergoing some kind of new or fresh or heavier persecution, and some people are wavering, and he's trying to encourage them, like, look, we have this great high priest, and don't be like somebody who falls away and rejects him, but remember instead that you were enduring through persecution before, and you can do it again. And I'll say that, maybe I'll say one last thing about this. Maybe they were being, maybe he could see that their growth was a little like on pause, their spiritual growth. And this brings to mind something that we as believers, sometimes it's hard to have the self-awareness to evaluate this, but if you can do, and definitely if you need somebody else to point it out, like, hey, have you evaluated this? I've noticed this about you. Have you evaluated this for yourself? Have you asked the Holy Spirit about it? And it's this: sometimes when there seems to be like a lack of like spiritual growth, like maturing, the process of maturing, sometimes it's okay, because like maybe you're like these people that are in this crisis pressed together moment, right? And you're spending your energy in enduring, and it's hard. You don't have maybe a lot of extra energy to grow. You're just trying to weather the storm. And when God brings you out of it, usually what happens is just like this explosion of growth that's been held back. But it can look the same if what's really happening is you're just becoming stagnant. If you're just kind of really just backing off, laying off the gas, and what's really going on is you just become a little apathetic or a little kind of complacent, right? So it's good if I'd encourage you, if somebody out of love says to you, look, I've just had this observation about you, like take it to heart and like ask the Lord, okay, is it because I'm just I'm suffering with some kind of loss, some kind of crisis, some kind of whatever, and I just need you to encourage me right now, or Lord, is it that I'm just become apathetic, that I've just quit trying? Is there something that I'm disappointed about that has kept me from pressing into you? Like, is there something that I need to be ministered to that needs healing so I can keep growing? And then lastly, he ends with a kind of a looking forward. He talks about their past, and now in the final verses of the chapter, he looks forward, and he says, "Do not throw away your confidence." Right? Remember those times where you in the past where you stood under persecution, and you considered it joy when your property was confiscated. Therefore, don't throw away your confidence, which has great reward. For you have need of endurance, in order that after you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. For yet, and here he quotes kind of a mashup of Isaiah chapter 26, a few verses in there, and Habakkuk chapter 2. But he says, for yet a very, very little while, and the one who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one will live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul is not pleased with him. And he says to his listeners, but we are not among those who shrink back to destruction, but among those who have faith to the preservation of our souls. So he kind of harkens back to the verses 22 and 23 that we read at the very beginning here, where he says, hey, therefore, because of this great high priest and all this stuff, he says, let's approach the throne with a true heart and full assurance of faith, and let's hold fast to our confession. So he's kind of like hyperlinking back to that wording by saying, hey, that confession, that confidence you have, that boldness that you had to come to the throne, don't throw that away. Don't throw away that confidence. It has a great reward, and he points them forward. He says, I know you need endurance. But after you've endured, after you've done God's will, you're going to receive a promise, because here's some scripture that talks about the promises that are going to be fulfilled, and that faith is what's needed to live through this. And he says, and I happen to know that you guys aren't the ones who shrink back, but you're in that group that has faith for the preservation of your souls. You got to persevere to the end. You got to finish well. And that's the Christian walk is the long game. It's not a quick fix for any of your problems. I think we've all been believers long enough to know that. For all its rewards, there's a lot of puzzles. There's suffering. There's unexplained things, and through it all, through the seeming triumphs and the seeming defeats, just endurance and faith. Faith is trust. And so what he's asking his hearers to do, and he's reminding them, is, look, you just need to trust. Whatever it looks like now, whatever you're going through, you need to trust. You need to have a belief that he's going to fulfill this promise, and that you're going to have a reward, and just keep trusting and moving forward. Don't step out of the line. Just keep moving forward. And chapter 11 is next. Speaking of this last line here, we are not those who shrink back to destruction, and the ones who have faith for the preservation of our soul. Hebrews 11 is what's next. So there you have it. So here's what I want to, from each of these sections, I want to bring out something, and I just want to talk about these things and ask you to just hear the Lord on one or more of these things. What is he saying to you through these passages? The author of Hebrews, he was writing to them, but this word is alive and speaks to us today. And he has warnings, and he has encouragements based on their past and encouragements based on their future. And so what is the Lord saying to you today? You know, the fact that we all have to give an account of our lives, and here when it comes to believers, I'm not talking about, am I going to get in the good place or the bad place? Kind of, that's not the thing that's being measured at this point. Right? If your name's written in the book of life, that's settled. But there still is a question of a reward or not. The Bible talks about, in lots of places, and actually very, very soon here, without faith it is impossible to please God, because you have to believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And so yeah, we're all going to have to give an account of our lives, and it's an important thing to keep in front of us. It's an important thing to teach our children when they're young, is that you're going to have to answer. And so, what is it? That's my question. What is it that you need to do now to avoid an uncomfortable conversation with God later? What is it that you need to do or stop doing now to avoid that part where God goes, hey, let's talk about this. Oh yeah, I was hoping you'd forgotten about that. For me, one of the things that you know, I've gotten. It's still very sobering, but although I feel like I've gotten like used to being in in this position, but it's as an elder, like any we just talked about the leaders that Jesus was getting onto for leading the people astray, the Israelites who were being supposed to be priests and representatives to the rest of the nations for God. Like when people are representing God and when people are responsible for others in various ways, right? It can be your kids, it can be your whatever. But the thing that my kids have kind of left the nest, the thing that is a lot newer to me and a lot more present, in the last few years is, okay, and I've had this thought like, I don't want to do this, or I do want to do this, or whatever the thing is, but what I really don't, I don't want to do this thing, but I have to because I know that I don't want to fail to this charge. I don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation. Said, Nate, you knew better and you didn't. Not because he's not going to forgive me of it, but it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, yeah, to say the least. And so what is it you need to do now to avoid an uncomfortable conversation later? So that's the first thing. The second thing is looking at our past, right? We've all been believers long enough, and I think in most cases this doesn't take more than a few days for most believers anyway. Like when they first become Christians, we all have things that we can look back to and go, yeah, I did. Here was a moment where I had a lot of faith. Here was a moment where, with God's help, I did something that was that surprised myself. And like a high water mark, like a high bar, And so those things, there's a reason that when God works in our lives and delivers us, and when we do things with His help, He asks in the Bible, He asks people to make a memorial, like remember this, because later you're gonna tend to forget that God did something mighty in your life and God used you in a certain way, and it's bad that you forgot, because you might just start to think that God's not able to do that anymore, and also you might start to doubt how much He can do through you, and that you can make it. I made it through that situation and it was 10 times worse. I can make it through this one. I made it through that situation and this one's worse, but not that worse. I'm pretty sure God can stretch me and help me through this one. Like those kinds of things, right? What does your old self say to your current self when you think about that? Right? To me, times of particular boldness are what call out to me from across the years. Because I'm a more like on the introverted side. I'm definitely not one of those outgoing evangelistic types. There's times I live in my head a lot, where I'm like, I think I heard that, but I'm not sure, blah, 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 all this evaluating. But when I think about the times that whether it was instant or whether it took me a long time to get there, but either way I did it, and I was bold, and I saw God work, and I saw the reward of my obedience, that encourages me to do it again. And it's a muscle that atrophies quickly for me. It's one of the reasons I like doing things like going to Mardi Gras and hanging out with people like Tony or Mike, who are outgoing, because then they can I can not ride their coattails, but kind of right. I'm put myself in that situation. But what is it that your old self is saying to you from across the years and speaking to you like you can do this? And by the way, If it's condemnation or kind of some kind of shame, then again, come talk to me, talk to Tony. That's not what the objective of this exercise. If it's oh, you failed that time and you failed that other time, if that's what you're hearing, then let's get rid of that. But what you do need to like recall is the times that God met you, and use that as fuel for your present situations. And then lastly, he's coming again, right? Jesus said, "I'm coming again, and I'm bringing my reward with me to start passing it out." And so that looking forward, right? Will you persevere to the end and finish the race strong? He's coming again. There's something to look forward to. There's a promise. There's a guarantee, a down payment we have now. It's called the Spirit. We experience it now. But there's something like a million times better than that that's coming. We just have to endure. Paul said, "I consider that my present sufferings are not to be compared, not worthy of comparison to what's coming." So, yeah, will you persevere and finish the race strong? Are you going to stroll across the finish line? Or are you going to finish at a dead sprint, arms pumping, legs pumping, breathing for air, summoning every last reserve of your strength to cross the line? To fulfill every bit of God's will for your life. Not casually wandering across the line, but full on to your last moment. To endure, to persevere. You know, most of us, a few accepted, most of us in this room have more days behind us than we do in front of us. But let me tell you, it's never too late to start beefing up your obituary. If you're like, man, I don't know if they'll have enough to say. I want them to be able to say more. It's never too late to dare great things in God, to do more, to follow His will more closely. And to hear that, "Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of your master." And for our younger folks, you're here in the room or listening online, I'll say it's also never too early. He has a plan for your life, and it already started. So if you have been doing something about it, you're behind. No, I'm joking. But it's already started. For the older folks, I say it's not finished yet, and so just keep on trucking to the end. And for the younger folks, yeah, it's already started. So it's not too early to say I'm going to do. It's not like, oh well, when I'm older, I'll do all these great things. Right now, I got my own stuff to do. No, it's never too early to step out in bold obedience to just lean into His will for your life, whether it's easy or hard, and for each one of us are going to be hard things to do. Your hard thing might be different than my hard thing, but there'll be easy stuff and there'll be hard stuff. So persevere to the end and finish strong.